Hello, everyone. You are listening to the Immersive Medicine Podcast. In today's episode, we talk with globally recognized experience designer, learning expert, author, and keynote speaker Caitlin Krause about her new book, Digital Wellbeing. Tune in with us as we share her experience in XR and AI and relate them to overall well-being and digital well-being. Awesome. Thank you all for joining us today. For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Cody. I am your co-host, and I'm a music therapist and therapy designer with years of clinical experience using music as medicine in mental health, rehabilitation, and neurologic disorders. With me today, as always, is my fellow co-host, Kiki.
Hey, what's up? It's Kiki or Kira here, your co-host, and I'm a digital arts and media educator with a passion for video games, digital arts, production, all that fun stuff. We also have here, I guess, Barnaby for the first time on this side of the camera. You guys usually don't get to see him. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for having me on this time. My name is Barnaby. I am the video producer and editor for this amazing podcast. I'm also a wellness coach. I predominantly work with digital artists and high value employees, just working on people, helping them to be the best people they can be, predominantly using technology and new tools. So I'm really excited to be here with Caitlin, and I'm just giddy with excitement. So I'm actually going to throw it to Ryan just so I can kind of calm down a bit. So Ryan, if you can please take it on.
I'm Ryan Douglas. I'm a low value employee and work with Barnaby at all. I work in designing therapies and in the realm of immersive medicine, as well as in brain computer interface and generally neuroprosthetics. Been building medical devices a long time, but I like doing this a lot better.
Awesome. Yeah. And then today, for viewers who can see, we have an amazing special guest with us, Caitlin Krause. Caitlin, tell everyone who you are, I guess. Share a little bit about your experience and why you're here today. And yeah, we're really excited to have you. So go for it.
Oh, thanks so much, everybody. It's great to be here.
Perfect.
I'm Caitlin Krause. I have a career path that's been really multifaceted, nonlinear. I would call myself a scientist and an artist. I started off as a computer programmer and then went into education, and I've taught at different levels, middle school, high school, now college, totaling 2 decades in education design, and then moved on to teach adults. And a lot of what I do with my company, Mindwise, involves experience design and bringing people maybe out of their preconceived expectations about what is and taking them to a different elevated level of well-being. So a lot of what I love is human imagination through wonder and awe. So in addition to what I'm doing with my company, I get to teach at Stanford in the wellness department a course called Digital Wellbeing by Design. So I love to create, to tinker, and right now it feels like the perfect time for spatial computing and gaming to take off. So thanks so much for having me here.
It's our pleasure. Honestly, we're so excited to share, well, to hear more about what you have to share and to really dive into your new book today, which we should probably talk about. So Caitlin is here. She wrote a book. It's really great. I've been reading it. It's called Digital Wellbeing. You can buy it now. Well, I think it's on pre-sale right now, technically, when everyone will hear this. But we're gonna kind of unpack a little bit about it to give listeners an idea of what's in the book. I think there's some really great concepts in here and some things that people can apply into their daily lives, which I think is really important. It's not just like, here's some ideas. It's here are these ideas and here's how you can actually use them in your daily life, which I think is very, very important in today's time. So let's see. I think the first big question is to really kind of unpack the name of the book. So it's called Digital Wellbeing. And I think everyone kind of defines well-being in different ways. So Caitlin, how would you define well-being and how does it kind of differ from digital well-being?
Well, I could answer you by going into the chapters, because it's funny. This is actually chapter 1 is kind of opening up to this new world of digital well-being, and then defining well-being through a new lens. I have the book right here. Since we're talking about digital well-being, I'm going to go a little meta right now and just name for people watching. I brought us outside on purpose. I could have been inside in the studio where I design computer worlds and different places and have headsets all around me, but I wanted to be in phygital form. So I have a lot of shake it up exercises that involve our physical layer stack first, and then layering on the digital on top of it. And I try to live that message every day intentionally, and that takes time kind of slowing down to really be present with myself and say, okay, how am I existing in a world that can be really noisy? So I'd name that first, Cody. It's a great question. Like, what's the difference between well-being and digital well-being? And the sum is, through this book, I interlace the two.
Mm-hmm.
And if you see me looking around in the environment while we talk, I'm actually very focused. It's just my mind is a little bit neurodiverse. So I tend to attach to different ideas. I have different styles and ways of communicating. And another point in this book is that we're opening up to new ways of being what I consider multilingual. So, how can we encourage other people to increase their digital literacies? It's not just one literacy. It's pluralized, and at the bottom base of everything is well-being. It's really hard to be creative. It's really hard to be innovative if you feel like your base level needs are not met. So in this book, I went back and investigated a lot beyond the buzzword. Like, this trend is for well-being, for mindfulness. I've been working in that space for a long time, and I've seen that sometimes it becomes a buzzword, and people say either, "Oh, I don't, I don't do yoga, so I can't be a well-being person." I've got to be in the grind to kind of prove it. And now I see people entering a new space where they're like, "Oh, with the rise of AI, we need new KPIs. We need new
Mm-hmm.
ways of measuring what success is." And so, there was a huge opportunity for me as someone who's tech savvy and also really understanding the world of mindfulness and well-being and storytelling and human elevation. So in sum, I see digital well-being as taking all of those digital tools, all of the games and the different applications that we have that involve technology, and allowing humans to be more in control of how they integrate them. And ideally, what would happen is, then as our literacies increase, we're able to elevate our life to a
Yeah.
new level where we can connect more deeply with the humans around us, with the environment. And it doesn't mean going away from biological nature. It means that we actually get to kind of sand away some of the rough edges that have been in our life in the past. So this book is an investigation, not about just the philosophy of that, but the how. Like, how would that actually take place? How does that look from different facets associated with the topic?
I love that part of it. That it's guiding you along. It's not just telling you about this place that may theoretically exist, but
Mm-hmm.
mostly moving you, to a place. And that is both being done by giving you very direct examples of how you can do something like this, but also redefining the conversation we're having. I think Caitlin's right on. We've got to look at things differently for a moment. We have to have different conversations. I'm thinking, we're going to have to think about digital therapeutics more like almost digital pharmaceuticals, really, because what we've seen, like from the agency perspective, and folks is like, well, these are medical devices. This is software as a medical device. It's like, well, when you think of it like that, you restrain it like that, and then we don't actually get the full possibility of what we can do with it, from the regulatory authority all the way to people understanding how is this possible, what's it doing. It's not really working the way most of the medical devices do, that they physically manifest change throughout your body. It's having you do something, ingest something more like you would take in a supplement or something nutritional, and then having a physiological and emotional and mental shift that we can literally measure in your brain. That's
Yeah.
a very different conversation than the one we've been having, even as these first as Achille came on the scene and Pear came on the scene, we were so anxious to get things cleared early on. We used the language that was available to us from the FDA versus now. I think you see deep well, and you definitely see it with Caitlin. We're saying, look, there's new words, there's new definitions. And I think this book starts that conversation.
And it empowers people, right? Because I think, people like Peter Attia talk about medicine 1.0 and turning into 2.0. But I really think this notion, I remember when I was a kid, I'd go to a doctor to feel like I understood more about my body. And I wasn't sure if I actually had agency. I'd kind of just give that over and say, okay, there's kind of this curtain here of the unknown. And in terms of the future of the medical world, also coupling with destigmatizing areas of mental health, people have more agency, then they feel empowered. And as Ryan was just saying, when you interact with something, I guess a good example is a pen. Like I say, I write this. I don't say the pen wrote this with my hand.
Right.
It's like the thing that you're interacting with actually becomes part of you. And when it becomes part of you and you're exercising it, you feel a sense of empowerment. And then it's like a cycle back where you're able to have a mindset shift that then plays out in your whole life. So
I love that. I mean, look at how the technology that's closest to us now, like these and the virtual headsets and stuff like that, we don't want to share those. They're literally ours. Now, in the case of
very
VR,
personal.
When Emily uses the VR headset, she does Supernatural. I'm just not putting that thing on, but but at the same time,
for a different reason, right?
But they're very personal devices, right? And that wasn't really where we started in this conversation. It wasn't that long ago that all the way back to the idea. I like Back to the Future when Marty McFly makes the joke about having one or two television sets, or says that, and they're like, that's not possible. And now it's like we have all of these things, and some of them are for general application and use, like the television set. And our TV is for everybody that will sit down in the living room. And then there's my phone, and it really is my personal environment. And it's
right.
And the VR set takes that. I think as you get more maybe integrated into that environment, it becomes even more personal, and it feels like it should be just for you in that case.
Yeah, I think that's one of the ways that you can really judge success, when you can, especially from like the education point of view, once you can kind of get a child or a student, regardless of age, once you can kind of get them to forget about the tool they're using, that's where the creativity comes. It takes a while to, learn the keybinds if you're, teaching in Unity, for example. If you're teaching in Fortnite, even, I like teaching in Fortnite because so many of my students already play Fortnite. So meeting them where they are, you're not going over that hurdle of learning the tool. They have the tool already. It's just how do they flex that tool differently. So I like how you put that.
Caitlin, do you mind if I ask a question just about how you talked about you have to kind of form this kind of idea of this relationship of how you interact with these tools and how you have, like Ryan just mentioned, your own personal identity with the well-being? Everyone's going to have these different ideas and perceptions of it. Could you try and think about, like, what's the building block? Like, what does someone have to do when they have to come to that realization that I need to do something differently, and then start interfacing with these tools differently to get that different experience? So many parents are talking about these tools are so negative because of that idea that there isn't that intentionality of positivity. Where do you think that, like, that aha moment comes with, like, oh yeah, I can use these tools for these outlets, I can use these tools for good? Like, when do you think that happens?
This is such a great question, because I can see my octopus brain going in different directions saying, let's take that one, let's take this part. So I'll just mention a few, and we can dive deeper in different directions. First off, let's talk about emotion, because when I say digital well-being, and let's say people come to a workshop, it's a corporate workshop, or I'm with a bunch of students, they'll come in, and then during one of the breaks, usually someone comes up to me and says, I'm really suffering, and I can see in their body language that they're kind of hunched and they feel a lot of shame. I think our society has a lot of shame, and I've noticed even in the meant to be empowering restorative experiences, people sometimes call them digital detox. And I want to change that, because that lingo kind of subtly cues people to think that digital tools are toxic.
Yeah,
and
that
that
negative
and that
connotation.
maybe they're toxic for kind of succumbing to something. And right now, two things are happening. We're becoming smarter as a society about algorithms that are not working for human well-being. So it's like, we're not falling for it. There's a different trend, and that's why I'm really hopeful. And that's also in the book.
That is super true. I was just having a conversation with one of the largest game publishers.
Yeah.
We were talking about why a lot of YT is doing what it's doing, and this whole idea of a new economy around building experiences that aren't around directly commercializing, right, but actually getting paid to make things that are good for you. The way that happens in medical device. And we were talking about the stats. I mean, once upon a time, you made these games for the 2% whales, which was kind of a toxic and terrible environment. But we've really tuned out to this, and we can feel it. These things, these experiences are so emotional, and we're so connected to it. We're kind of tired of being screwed by them. So now it turns out that only 1% of people pay for games at all, and only 5% of that 1% will fall in that whale category. So it's getting harder and harder to misuse media as our media nutrition, our media knowledge gets higher, and we can better quantify what it feels like in our body to be interacting with this. We don't feel good about being taken advantage by something that we know has a lot of power around us, and that we really want to lean on emotionally to become stronger, not weaker.
Yeah. It's such a shift in the way that this whole industry is going. So that would be one of the trends I'm seeing. And I really work to evolve that, because sometimes it takes one-on-one care and being in a group of people where you say, hey, we used to treat human resilience as like, am I strong enough as an individual? And now it can shift to what's happening cooperatively in a system where, this is back to Amy Edmondson and creating safe psychological spaces for people to experiment, explore, fail. This is why XR environments are great too for prototyping, and game design is awesome for simulations, because then people, like, emotionally, what I want to shift people into is an emotion of curiosity over fear. Kira was talking about teaching, using these environments where people are already there. They're already there in Fortnite, and, they're all playing something, and it's like, catch yourself being curious. And then what you were afraid of is kind of flipped, because, we wouldn't have fear if we didn't care about something. So there's already something invested, which I think is great. The way I'm approaching things, back to Barnaby's point, is kind of like if you've ever seen those nesting dolls. I work first with a lot of embodiment practices, everything from deep breathing exercises to like feeling yourself, feeling your sense of agency, and allowing people to just come back. Like, people are so over inundated that sometimes they're constantly responding to the environment instead of just showing up and saying, what do I want out of this experience? Like, this experience is for me. I'm not in nature, I am nature. And these digital layers are really like a layered experience that should be freedom that would be our most important sacred opportunity. And I know Ryan and I have talked about that in the past, like both of us, gravitate toward that word. How can I open up, and not my freedom in kind of a struggle with your freedom, but like, what does it mean to have a mutual care? And this is why so much of what I design is for collective, cooperative experiences, because you can have it solo, that's awesome, then you have an internal connection. And then when you feel that kind of co-sense, co-presence, whether it's people on teams, people playing at different times, but having that sense of ambient co-presence, then people have a sense of belonging in a culture where so far loneliness has been a trend, suicide rates are going up, like the problems are really serious, and we can use a lot of
loneliness trend to the point of being it's the next epidemic or pandemic that we're talking about. And I think all of this is making tons of sense. What I think is going to happen, Caitlin, is we wake up to what is actually possible with our social media interactions, our play with one another, really our virtual environments that then merge. We want to see people merged out in real world exchanges as much as in virtual exchanges. When we come to understand that, I think we're going to go through the sort of grieving pattern you see before. I think you're going to see people get angry, which is coming like, you could have done this instead of that. Then I think we're going to go through these various points, and we're going to land at a place of the expectation is just going to be much higher. It's no different than what we went through with nutrition and what we're going through right now. We kind of had a big sugar world that built us a food pyramid that we turned out is not quite right, and now we're accidentally sort of really diabetic, right?
Upside
I
down,
can't
yeah.
have Pop-Tarts for breakfast every day.
Yeah, and so
What do you mean this isn't how it's supposed to be?
are you telling me you don't know that you put down the Pop Tart? All right. So, but really there was a lot of, we're angry about a few things right now too, right? That was big sugar. Those folks are real. And if you want to go meet some billionaires that you're going to come to love, you're going to find that sugar made people a lot of money. And so they lobbied, and you could say outside of understanding, maybe, but a lot like we saw with tobacco industry too. There was a time, where everybody was smoking, everybody was comfortable with it. And now we're like, hey, you kind of owe us back for what you did to us. And that's the same thing that's going to happen. We're coming around. We're changing the food pyramid. We're learning how to eat. And we're figuring out that we taught our little ones and we taught ourselves, habits that really, especially sugar, since it has such an impact on our brain, we can't really break that habit so easily. And we're kind of stuck where we were with tobacco. Well, big dopamine is out there too. And big dopamine knows who it is, right? And they know there are people that know how to make algorithms TikTok that really, are
Is somebody gonna say it?
they know what they're doing. They pride themselves on what they've built, and so we're all wielding these same internal medicines. Dopaminergic response, serotonergic response, all the rest of it. The question is, what are you doing with it? With what intent and how? Right. And when people wake up, it's like, look, I'm not telling you shouldn't have a Big Mac. Pull up and have a great Big Mac. I think it's important you realize that's 1,000 calories and make your call. Right.
Yep.
And so go and TikTok. But I think you got to understand when you're TikToking what is also happening, and then make a conscious decision for yourself. And that will help you feel in your body and space, the thing that you can't do when you don't understand the environment you're playing in, which is judge what's happening. And so I think we're heading there. And I love, the other thing, there's part of the book, Caitlin, in chapter 7, where, and this is from you hanging out with Zabosky, I could see the whole thing in there. Imagine if it all went well, which is what Dave really wrote on too. He did this whole thing on AI. What if it all goes wonderfully? And Caitlin just riffed off of that to a place that I loved. And it's like, imagine if it all goes well. Well, with knowledge, it will, right? We will head in the direction of what's good for us when we can.
Yeah, imagine if it all goes well. And also, chapter 7 and chapter 8 are kind of, I needed them to be in the middle of the book. You'll notice that this book has, I called it an interlude by Rodney Mullen, the skateboarder.
I love Rodney Mullen.
So he and I met each other a while back, and I love him too. He's so soulful. And we were riffing on ideas and kind of talking about flow state, flow state, and how you can both ground in your body and also explore that possibility. Because just side note to Ryan's point, these are serious problems, and we don't have to meet them by gripping and being uncomfortable all the time. And I find a lot of the topics associated with things like well-being and digital well-being go into either a somber space or like low energy, take it down. And presence is awesome. People, my jazz is imagination. I study the human emotion of wonder and awe. So when Rodney and I started talking, and he was offering this piece for the book, I thought, well, we can't start there. We have to get there. Like you said, we have to meet people where they're at, take them on a ride in this book. And then around chapter 7, 8, that's where it really kind of explodes into, what if? This is a season of hope, a season of possibility, and also a season, I think, of a healthy impatience where people are like, oh, I know what's going on. I'm frustrated by ways of the past. I'm not going to put up with that anymore.
I love that. And I think, for a lot of reasons we can't, right? And it's important to remember what we're doing here. There's two things that are happening here today. We're helping anybody that wants to find Caitlin and Caitlin's book to find that. But then remember, kind of from our world too, we're talking a lot to creatives, and there's an impatience here as well. There's a brand new economy waiting out there with a massive amount of reimbursement that's coming on stream for those people that can convert media to medicine, that can arrive in this immersive medicine environment. I think it's important that we keep angling back. And I'm going to say, grab this book to be the better version of you. But what if you want to be the person that builds things that help people on the journey to the better version of you? Caitlin and I have talked a lot about, there's a series of things that are going to come out, and hers is the leading edge of, this is how you do it, folks, right? Reading this is coming to understand how you can take those experiences that you're creating and make sure that they reach people in a way that they can be most effective, which is going to set you up in a way that you can earn in a different way. I think a way that's going to feel a
Yeah.
lot better for the creatives as well. We
Hmm.
don't want to be monetization engines. I love the things I've built and the things I've commercialized and stuff like that, mostly when they're adopted by people to the point that they just can't live without them and they're good for them. But there is that other part of the business where the job is to get you to buy that thing and do that stuff.
Right.
And then we talk about the most pervasive thing you can do is change somebody's mind, and this literally can do it. And I think for media, their soul's a little broken, right? The people that wanted to tell great stories and do great work and do great things have become sort of slot machines,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so we want to separate that back out. And this, if that's a journey you're ready to go on, in the next year or so, you're going to see the availability of about $100 billion of new reimbursement showing up
Wow.
in the United States alone. This is a whole new economy. This is equal to, give or take, what's being spent on video games already. And they're forecasting that by the time private insurance is involved here, we're talking about $250 billion of new potential revenue that's out there to be captured. And you're going to do nothing but a service to your country because, I mean, if we have to go through other means, if we have to go through pharmaceutical means, well, that only works so well and it's going to be tricky for folks. If we have to go through talk therapy, that's also true. Not everybody has amazing results with talk therapy, but the
Right.
other problem, well, as we go through this mental health emergency, is we don't have the folks to do it. For every, 200,000 kiddos, there is one child psychiatrist, one,
Yeah.
right? They take 10 years to build. The amount of credit hours to get there are insane. I mean, by their own accreditation, they've made themselves very special. So special now that they're pretty much unusable. Our
Hmm.
psychologists, I mean, we know this from Lisa Marin, who heads up our medical advisory team, and Cody works with, and I work with. She runs the program at OHSU. She got involved 4 years ago with what we're doing because she can't make enough psychologists fast enough. So we're going to need to solve these problems in other ways. And literally, as those people that can wield media, tell story, craft a opportunity at agency, and have you land at this place where the challenge condition is managed, where you can hit a microtransactional level of accomplishment that helps you feel like you're on the way to something great. And if you can do that while feeling the way Caitlin's experiences take you, this wonder, this awe, well,
Hmm.
that's the kind of stuff that's going to help us get a lot better. And we can do that for the price of a video game on the accessibility level of a video game, which is all that is going to make sense right now.
Yeah.
We don't
Which
have
is
$2,000 per person per month for talk. Let's say all the talk therapists rose out of wherever. Where do we think this gets paid for? Right? I mean, this is tax monies, or this is your insurance costs going up again. It doesn't just manifest.
there's a
Right.
chapter about this in the book, Ryan, and I know it's slowly unfolding because the book goes live tomorrow, but I was talking with Esther Perel. She's called AI Artificial Intimacy. But then if you
Hmm.
unpack the layers, there can be stages of onboarding, stages of meeting somebody and giving access. I also interview a bunch of different people who are in the psychology space, and also access to that beginning mental health care that people need to feel seen and heard and like they have an onboarding. So digital media is where it's at. It can be medicine. And I love that you're tying it into patriotism because, my parents were in the foreign service. I grew up all over the world. I always had to move into different places and spaces. My patriotism is really strong. And when people ask me, well, what is this about? I'm like, it's not mine for me. This is a movement. I'm part of a movement where a lot of us are working here trying to support each other,
Absolutely.
co-sense,
And
and
that's where loneliness goes to die is a movement, right? When you're part of
Hmm.
something, and we really do all need to be part of something bigger than ourselves. American exceptionalism has a downside for those Canadians that are with us right now, and it's which is that you don't become part of anything bigger than what you imagine yourself
yeah.
to be. If your ego is the biggest thing in the room, you are
Hmm.
lonely. I guarantee you. Probably dangerous as well, but definitely lonely. And
I
so
had a book right before this called Mindful by Design, and I started it with a quote that says, when your passion meets the world's greatest need, that's where you act. And
Hmm.
that's Frederick Buechner, and Parker Palmer's been a big influence. He wrote The Courage to Teach and Courage to Lead programs. He was a social justice warrior in like the 1970s, and he's just always talking about the Mobius strip, like how can your inner life and your outer life feel like they have some sense of integrity and alignment. Yeah, so a lot of the way I live is living by that, and that does mean, okay, sometimes people can see my emotions, or sometimes I
Hmm.
get to be passionately in the world and be able to reach others in very human ways. But that's how I feel called to show up. So yeah, this is part of that.
And we need a little piece of that back too, because the other thing that we used to do to rally up as a nation, if it wasn't war, which I prefer us not to do, it was taking on something of consequence. It was space. It was big infrastructure and energy. It was health. Well, if you look at all those things now, well, I mean, three of them, one individual is trying to corner the market on all three things that used to belong to all of us, right? And so that again is very isolating for everybody else. So this is something that calls us all back in. I think we're all storytellers on some level. We all got something to participate with. And I think those stories that are built through lived experience are some of the most therapeutic bridges that are out there. And the ability to do this. And then you look at all the tools that are coming on, Caitlin, and how de-skilled this is going to be. It's going to be at some point soon that we're all going to be able to share something fantastic from the inside of ourselves out and find those people that we best connect with who need those stories too, to feel okay about the journey they're on at the moment.
Yeah.
Caitlin, do you mind if I just ask a quick question that kind of goes back into your book? I don't know if either of my guests have a question that kind of lead into it, but
Ask
Ryan
everything and anything. Yeah.
Ryan mentioned something perfectly, that we have this currency that we could use to be able to change the trajectory and the relationship we have with these medias. We're becoming so much more intelligent. We know that they have the opportunity for good, and we'll be able to suss out the ones that aren't. You took some time in your book to discuss some really, really great ones that are already doing some great work. And like Ryan said, we're going to have to start having a conversation about how we actually do this. I'm not sure if either of my guests have the question, but there's a question about what tools already exist that are doing great work. Do you might be able to discuss that a little bit?
Sure thing. And Cody, I don't know if you want to color sidebar that too, because I know you were talking about it too. I could jazz with it though. I feel like I do go into the tools, and that's, you.
Well, yeah, no, so you definitely so in chapter, I think it was definitely chapter 7, you give some great examples of some games that we even brought up on the podcast before, like Animal Crossing, and It Takes Two and Journey. And you talk about, what are these games doing? What is this media doing to create this, mindful experience, or what are they implementing towards this digital well-being? So I think maybe just sharing some of that with our listeners would be really insightful, because they're things that we've talked about before, but having your perspective on that and how it can relate to, this digital well-being concept, I think is really important.
Awesome. This is also a chance to kind of, I've done some research on books in different forms, and actually having a physical book is something that your brain attaches to differently, because you're actually looking at what part of the page it's on and
right.
flip the page and all that. So I'm in the middle, just so people can picture it. And I just want to read some highlights from what Barnaby's talking about, Cody's talking about. This is from Well-Being Through Spatial Computing, Gaming, and Extended Reality. So people who are curious about that, I go into. Just to back up for a moment, I talk about metaphorical links and Seymour Papert. So Seymour Papert was one of the people developing the Logo programming language, was one of the kind of premier people, pioneer in the field of AI, machine learning, and education technology. So I read Papert's Mindstorms a few decades ago, and then was really influenced by the way he designed lifelong kindergarten, because he designed all of his programs for what he called the 4 Ps: projects, passion, peers, and play. And how do you have those 4 Ps in design? So
I have lifelong immaturity. Does that count?
Fight to keep that, Ryan.
No, I don't have to fight. It's here.
All natural.
It's here to stay.
Technology should not be used to program children, but rather children should use technology to build and express their understanding of the world.
That's beautiful.
And as I've said, we're all kids in bigger bodies. Like, we don't have to lose our creativity and wonder. So I talk about this kind of intelligent tutoring system. People might think, oh, AI just came on the scene in the past 3 years. No, it's been here for decades.
Oh, yeah.
It's just that with this rise of LLMs, now it's gone mainstream, and a lot of people have it in their, in their daily life.
In their pocket, yeah.
Well, and we like to call it ML, which is what it actually was back in the day, until we wanted to put it on the hype curve. So we'll AI it for a moment, but there it is.
So just to read a little bit of this section, there's a part called that starts with consumers and creators, because I don't think it's actually binary. You're choosing what to consume, and then
Mm-hmm.
eventually that's going to be a kind of flywheel into your creation. So we become what we eat. I write, as we strive to emphasize opportunities to create media, because it's always like a creation system. Using a lot of principles, one of the key ones in understanding mindful media is that consumption becomes creation. We
Hmm.
as leaders and designers need to create better media for others to consume so that they in turn can become better creators. A corollary is that our very choice of what we consume is a creation in itself. Think of ourselves as chefs. When we create a meal, the choice of ingredients created by others is what leads to our own creation. It's a remix culture that we inhabit, Kirby Ferguson. And sometimes those original ingredients, their quality, become hidden in the mix. We might not recognize that the base ingredients lack nutrients. TikTok, no. I'm going to put
Well, I think even more than that though, the conversation I've been really working on a lot right now as we're taking this up a level is where does that creation happen? What does it mean for us to make media? What is media in its entirety? This that we're doing now is media. The conversation you're having in your head is media. Where's the game that you play? And this is actually something that JT and I our head of product and CEO is this conversation is, do you need a narrative? He's like, I don't think you do for this to work. I'm like, it absolutely has to exist. The question is, where is it?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
sometimes it's in your own mind, just like the game is in your own mind, just like the new thing you've created is living right there, right now, and it's having deep influence on you. And this is where we have to start thinking about media as more of a pharmaceutical. When you build a pharmaceutical, you think both about the active ingredient and you think of something called a carrier. At the
Hmm.
very least, this media is a digital carrier, and it sets you up for a place where you're more bioavailable for what's going to happen next, to think a different thing, to process a different way, to end up then emotionally or physically adopting a new set of behaviors, and most of which could have been you listened to the symphony, and then the rest of the interactivity was in your mind.
Hmm.
But you still created media at that moment. And if at the particular time that you were creating that media in your moment, you're being, predatorily challenged by the idea that you have to buy the sort of happiness to be able to, fit into this group here that then 3 weeks later gets nerfed down to the place that it doesn't function anymore. And you fall socially through this, weird constructed world that is your only connectivity. You're going to create media in your mind there that you suck.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And because we control these worlds and our brains aren't set up for the idea that we're actually completely simulating your environment, when you're running around in that environment, you're like, oh, this is like the real world. If I'm good at something, I'm good at it. No, you're not. We are constantly, look at what JT does, or you look at something like Zengens. Two people go in there, and if we want you to experience something, you're both going to think you were one of the best rhythm players at the moment, but he detuned one over the other. He made you better, you worse, you this, you that.
Right.
It's completely in our control. When that is utilized, as Caitlin was first suggesting, is not appropriately, then you're making bad things and you're helping people make other bad things in their own minds, and you're building ruts and troughs of despair in individuals. The media is everywhere, and you are 100% responsible for what you put out there, and your creations beget creations over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I read out loud kind of speaks to that, because it was the lead in to a section about media as malady, because you have to point out the destructive game design that deflates the well-being.
Yeah.
And then it turns into a whole section about mindful media as medicine, game strategies that work well for well-being. So I give examples. I give different kind of keywords, including player-centered design, the user research and testing, sandboxing, clear labeling and messaging. And it's not just a list. There's a lot of examples of positive game environments,
Yeah.
and a whole section on examples at play.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
a
I actually
fantastic
wanted
section.
to talk to you about that. As an avid gamer myself,
I love it.
I actually really enjoyed that section, the mindful media strategies, because a lot of those games I've actually either played or heard of, and they're on my list to play. Now, I wasn't really aware, or I wasn't really thinking, "Ooh, I need a mindful game." It was just I like to have balance within my games. So
Hmm.
I play a lot of games like Overwatch and Call of Duty, which are very fast paced, like So it's nice to have the, stark opposite of, Monument Valley, Animal Crossing. We, like Cody said, we talked about that in one of our previous episodes. So what I wanted to get more into was how do I put this? What can you share what some of those strategies are? And then can we kind of talk about how those strategies can be applied to like digital therapeutics, or when we're talking about this immersive medicine? How can we use some of those games that have already been out there that are kind of checking those boxes? How can they be used in a medicinal sense?
Mm, I love this because we're familiar with certain territory and it's not siloed. That's the whole
Hmm.
idea. Like, thanks, Kiki. I feel like us mentioning it both as gamers, who self-identify, and other people who are not familiar with the games, they might say, "Oh, now I'm curious about something that I actually
Yeah.
thought was not my type of game," because they might have heard something about it, the way it's designed, and thought, "Oh, it's not a wellness game." It
Right.
doesn't have to be a wellness game siloed to promote well-being, and I think that's one of the key discoveries that I've had over the years. Um, Cody, are there any ones that you want to point out? Because I have the whole list in front of me. I'm wondering if there's one we should use as our
Well, I mean,
example.
I know we're talking about loneliness,
Mhm.
and loneliness is huge, and I know, well, within like Journey, there's themes of that, but also within Animal Crossing, that was a great one. I also like what you talked about with World of Warcraft. I mean, I played a lot of World of Warcraft growing up, and the amount of
Hmm.
community and like cooperative experiences and shared experiences that are happening there is
Even It
really,
Takes Two.
yeah,
Yeah,
and It
Yeah.
Takes Two is fantastic.
I
So
really
yeah,
like I really like that direction, and I like the idea because we're starting to go into the world of good media, bad media, and I want
Yep.
to be really clear about this idea that there could be very deeply engaging and what I would call like emotionally disturbing levels of media that aren't necessarily bad media. And depending
right.
on who you are, if where what is difficult for you came from a dark place, you might need to go back to that dark place to gain agency and control. And really, that's when that simulation will kick on in your brain in a way that you're like, I can do this because I'm doing it in a
Hmm.
place that's very similar to where I didn't have control before. That's not what we're talking about. What Caitlin's alluding to is the ways that we basically convince you to spend your money. That is pretty much where media goes off the rails. I'd say 95% of the time. If it's
Right.
not where you can spend your money, it's where we get your attention and your economy to try to radicalize your thoughts. These are places where we have to have conversations. We usually want something from you at this point that is really immoral to be asking for in the first place.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
let's imagine. Let's take this question from Kiki and apply a few things here that are not, oh, let's take what is and like slightly shift it, but ideally the experience design, and there are a lot of different examples in the book, like the
yeah.
strategies and what to, but the experience of a game in my mind starts before you actually start playing. So
Hmm.
Hmm.
what I've worked on is also in the book and describes the hero's journey of, who's playing the hero, the player. We as the designers play the mentor. And
Hmm.
sometimes there are mentors that we put into the game, and they can either be embodied as creatures or figures, or they could be just little support tools and curiosities, because I don't want to be led by the
Firewatch.
nose. I want to get into a game and feel like it's a choose your own adventure where maybe, to point out the storytelling underneath, it's emergent, right? It's an emergent story.
Hmm.
So in the design of all these games, whether it's Animal Crossing, whether it's Journey, the person in it feels that surprise and delight and that kind of goosebumps, like, oh, this world is for me. Like, I'm really
Yeah.
here and I'm having an effect on the world, and it's morphing based on
Well,
something. It's so beautiful when it happens, and that's why the hero's journey, to me, it's really important that I call it the scuba model. You set
Yeah.
intentions beforehand before you even cross a threshold into a game. A
well,
person understands that they get to choose. It's
let's
not
Hmm.
hold you there before you go too far into school because it's this is a really
like
important
this.
note right here.
Yeah.
Note right here.
Hmm.
What Caitlin is telling you is that you have to have agency with. There are certain things in this game if you want to arrive at a place of therapeutic value, and it actually turns out if you want to build a good game, which is crazy how much this overlaps. There are certain things that as a designer you need to do, and one is you need to allow agency. Any forced behaviors, I'm going to tell you that is exactly the stuff that people are going to pull up on top of it. And we've been talking a lot about this. We got great data as a net result of this. If the forced behaviors also tend to be the overt therapeutic mechanics in the game, you're literally going to turn people off,
Mm-hmm.
right?
It feels
That is a
pushy.
smell that nobody wants to smell. They're just going to, and we got examples of where we get people to do things and they do it because we don't break the fourth wall and they're part of the game in the moment and they love it. And then as soon as you flip it and make it the overt therapeutic mechanic, they don't like it. It's the
Doesn't
same
work.
thing.
Yeah.
Right? We don't like,
Performative then.
we like having control and we don't want to, control is taken from us almost constantly in our real world. It's very hard to gain agency within the real world,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how
right?
do you have control, but not that wild kind of lack of safety? Because it
Right.
doesn't mean like, oh, the person's just off on their own to explore. No, they feel that safety, they feel guidance, and kind of that safe challenge balance where there's
Yeah.
always something like having a really good dance partner. You don't want your dance partner to be like spaghetti arms when you
You
enter
don't
an
want them
experience.
forcing you around,
Yeah,
right? It's that
yeah,
balance.
but you want them to have some kind of pressure and a feeling like, oh, there's a delight here, and you're in it, you're in the river. So when people are with me, I do a lot of that priming, and sometimes that
Hmm.
great design is going to be invisible. They'll never
Yes.
know. They'll just feel it. They'll feel it because they're in that environment and they can kind of feel that engagement. This goes also to the 7 themes that all begin with the letter E.
Yes.
But
Yes.
that wonder rich game design and computing has to do with inviting over prescribing. And with every invitation, it's okay if the person just wants to have an initial, what we might call a superficial experience. This is why I also like in co-shared spatial environments, people can be in observer mode sometimes if
Hmm.
they want to. It has to be, in my mind, a low barrier to entry, because then you're guiding someone to do something that eventually can be a apotheosis. That under of the hero's journey is actually going into something that feels soulful.
Hmm.
Because when I'm in a game, sometimes I have an experience. I don't know if you 4 have had it. I'm sure you have. But have you ever just felt like you're in an avatar, it becomes you, and then you suddenly have a moment like, who am I? Like this physical is also my sacred shell, and it's
Yeah.
like you're in another shell sometimes, and it's like, who am I? What am I invited to become? And that becoming can be a beautiful, soulful transmission that then back and cross the threshold. The idea for me, people say, "Oh, do you want people to kind of disappear into your game?" And
Hmm.
is it about going into some different realm and never coming back? No, you want to come back across the threshold. And the end of the scuba um, metaphor that I have is that the A is for apply, like apply
Right.
that awareness of some transformation so that it's not a circle, it's a spiral where you come
Yeah.
out and you spiral up into a higher plane. And this gets back to, I know Barnaby is you're a wellness coach, and what do we want? We don't want people to be dependent on us for an experience. We want them to, loft, lift, and feel like, oh, like I can apply that. And if
Yeah.
certain things are scary, I understand that. I want to meet people where they're at and invite a certain level of safe discomfort at times, because people need that. We're in a world where right now I've seen it.
Absolutely. You need to take control over something that looks and feels a lot like the stuff that is scary. So you know you have the capability to take
Yeah.
control of the things that are actually scary.
Yeah. I
Right?
mean, we do so many similar concepts in music therapy. The same thing. The biggest thing in music therapy is not, well, it is the music because that's the driving therapeutic change. But the big thing is not the musical skills or the musical quality. It's about the transfer of knowledge, right? So we're doing a musical experience in music therapy, not to make something lovely and beautiful or harmonic, but to really work on these life skills that are embedded into the experience that the client doesn't even realize they're working on until at the end when we say, hey, did you realize when we were
Mm.
performing or working on this song or learning this new instrument that we were actually working on our stress management, we were working on overcoming these new difficulties. We were learning to be confident in uncomfortable situations and overcoming those initial fears. And then the client goes, oh wow, I had no idea that I was working on all of these amazing things that I've been struggling with. I thought I was just making music. And so I think that's exactly what we're trying to pull into these digital experiences, is to embed them and, like you're saying, make them invisible. If people don't know that they're doing this amazing thing, it's working. As soon as they know that they're doing it, then they're going to subconsciously start fighting it or trying to fit into the mold of what they think they need to do. And it needs to just be this natural, guided, not even guided, but tailored. Like you're saying, we need to set up this safe space to where they can't fail, but there is that nice amount of challenge to where they're driven to pursue and to continue to stay motivated in the experience or exercise or activity. This is just amazing stuff.
Cody, can I ask you a quick question? Just because it's exactly what we're all talking about. Caitlin talked about not having a spaghetti arm when you're in this process and wanting to be guided with a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
This is a question for everyone, but specifically Cody and Kira, because both of you have had mentor roles. Ryan always talks about the purpose of this podcast is to let people know, how do we actually do this? Like, how do we actually get people to make these experiences that can change people's lives? Kira as a teacher and Cody as a therapist, what are some of those tools that you both use to get people, and Caitlin, you might understand this, when you're talking about putting a VR experience, you're actually putting on the VR headset. Ryan, like you talked about, it's terrifying. It's scary, it's dark, it's unknown. You don't know what experience.
And always hardest when you need it the most.
Exactly. So what are some tools that we can, as a game designers, I always forget that I'm a game designer. What are some tools as game designers that we can use to be able to make that safe space? As a wellness coach, we always talk about that relationship and trying to make our clients safe. But what are some things that you both or anybody in the call can really point out that really makes and that we can really pull on to make people feel safe, to get them engaged with these experiences and get them to even get involved with what we're even talking about?
That's a really good question. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me is something we've already brought up, but it's about meeting people where they're at, right? And being really aware of resource-oriented approaches to experiences and therapies. Like, for example, if I'm doing music therapy with a client and or even music lessons per se, and we're trying to learn the piano and they don't have a piano at home, why would we learn piano if you're not actually going to have a piano to learn and to practice and to use that at home? So it's thinking about not just that experience that we're in, but how that relates to life outside of that experience or that therapy or that activity, and finding ways to relate that to their daily lives. And I've personally used a lot of game music in a lot of my sessions working with kids, because they're either really into Disney or they love Minecraft and they love Roblox or they love these games. And so finding ways to meet them where they're at, to where I don't need to teach them a nursery rhyme. Like, who cares? Nobody wants to learn the wheels on the bus. But if you want to learn a song on piano that's like the Minecraft theme, well, that's really exciting. Now I'm actually interested, and now I'm actually, motivated to engage in something that, I didn't really want to even sit at the piano.
I do want to learn the wheels on the bus, though. I like the song. I like going up and down, like around and around. I think
the most flexible song.
But kind of coming back around to this, look at that crazy overlap. What we're talking about is the same way you design that experience is identical to what we really want to get done in the game design as well, right? And I think the other thing too is we don't talk about what's hard in reality. Matter of fact, we often tell people in medicine that things that are really hard are really easy. Just take your pill. It's really easy. You just pop it in your mouth. It just turns out it isn't really easy, right?
Yeah.
Just take control of the situation. It's really easy. Agency is almost impossible to get a hold of in real life. We can simulate things, and if you're talking about agency in what we'll call difficult or challenging situations, how do you do that without legal liability and all the rest of the things that we're talking about? But I say this all the time to my buddies and stuff like that. We, or the folks that, like JT and Sam Brow that I'm hanging out with, we've done good things and we're in good places, but we don't really have a lot of control. If I decide today that all this beautiful woodwork should be painted black, if I do that, by tomorrow, Emily and I are going to be sideways. I don't have that choice, right? Or if I decide to move all the furniture around in my home, this is my own home, I only have so much agency because we kind of huddle as a community around in various ways and do various things. And then there's these places where we can go in. In Minecraft, anything I choose to build in that environment, if I go and want to just be there by myself, I can make whatever I want. If I've decided that houses should be upside down, the roof starts like this and it goes up like that, that's my world and I can play in its entirety. I don't get a lot of that. So that agency portion, and then the control mechanisms, and then finally the other thing that's really hard that all of us desire to do is to complete things, to finish stuff. Caitlin has just finished this book.
Mm-hmm.
That was hard. It's exactly right. But
It was.
she can't do it on her own. She's done, but is she done? Now she has to distribute this book. She has to reach
Mm-hmm.
out and work with people on a whole other level. And to get to that level of completion means we lean on other folks. Her publicist is going to need to do certain things. Her publisher has to do certain stuff. We've got to do things like stop right now and remind everybody that you got to go buy this thing on Amazon. This is the most important week.
Yes.
You are stopping Caitlin from completing right now. But seriously, I mean, it is actually, I
Check it
should
out.
say that too. For authors, this is a really important week. This is where folks get a sense of how much they're going to drive the book forward. Rolling that
Mm-hmm.
back into what we're talking about. I mean, we don't have all of that. And then we can go into a world where we do. And when we get in that world, if we can get you engaged, running in a flow state environment, shut down the rumination and just shut down the front of the house,
Yeah.
then we get subconscious access to you. Well, those experiences that you're being involved with start teaching you things and changing you mentally and physically and rewriting scripts. This is super, super powerful and
100%.
almost impossible anywhere else.
Yeah. I mean, Ryan, thank you for pointing out so much, because two things are coming up. And I know we're kind of sandwiching in book as a delivery of these messages. I appreciate
Mm-hmm.
that, because it is meant to be a place for reflection on these practices. Leaders often secretly want to be perfect. So a lot of this book is aiming to normalize the process of deep listening, because I'll ask people, what's the best skill you can have? And Barnaby, as you're asking about a different experience, leading someone to something that they have never seen before, experience, how that design works. Sometimes it also involves deep listening on the part of leadership. Like, what are your teams searching for? So even in the book, I've put in a lot of reflection tools, a lot of questions you can use with teams to guide them into different approaches, whether it's to AI, whether it's to immersive medicine and media, whether a leader actually wants to empower by talking about digital well-being using this new framework and new lens.
Yeah.
How do you become an engaging leader that doesn't work by force, but again by invitation and cooperation, where you say, hey, why don't you lead me? I don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
And for me as a teacher, maybe I see Kiki nodding, it's like that was one of my biggest lessons, that I don't have to be the expert in everything.
So I want folks to see right now how this is textbook one in immersive medicine. And well, you think I'm kidding, but
holding it up.
Yeah, there you
if you
go.
go take a look at what Sam and I have been up to at the moment, we're running around at universities. We've just been at Ohio State. Where they have an amazing computer sciences program and one of the best medical programs as well. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but 4 years ago we were saying things like, Sam and I, immersive medicine will become a discipline. You're going to end up all the way on the PhD level. You might even be an MD, PhD in this. Well, now there are two programs running. One is running in California, and there's an I think it's at your school that there's an MD now in interactive media, and then Dr. Dr. Boki has just turned around now, and he's going after this in Italy, which sadly, as far as the research concern is done, they are way ahead of us, and we got to catch up to what they're getting done. And those conversations, at the Ohio State we're having was, what do you think about this as something that we teach people how to do, how to wield, how to get going? In which case, you're going to see Caitlin's shining face right there, at least virtually, going, this is how we get this stuff going. And by the way, dedicated reading, required reading. Right?
Yeah.
But this really is something that is going to get you into that place where you're starting to understand what we're talking about. I think you're also going to find out, if you're an experienced designer, you already knew what we were talking about. So it's going to be that lock up of that reaffirmation. Sorry, Caitlin.
It's intuitive. And I do think, I say books are not static. They're tools for conversation. And this book has many branches, many examples, resources that then can become spatialized. Again, it was meant to be each chapter as beads on a necklace, where they all correlate in terms of digital well-being being the thread. But as we talked about, Cody's interviews in the chapter on music as medicine, there's digital well-being in different ways and facets. There's a chapter early on about social media, and it addresses a lot of the hot topics in ways that are not just, this is what is and this is the problem, but it has solution-based opportunities for people to say to somebody else, hey, I want to have a conversation with you about it, and we're going to bounce ideas off what this book is leading us to do. So
Yeah,
really
and
wanted to look at it as a conversation tool.
I feel like it's really meant, like it reads well for such a wide audience too, right? Like it's not just for gamers, it's not just for like young people who are like tech enthusiasts. I think anybody can really benefit from reading this book, and there's so much that you can apply for the way you interact with digital spaces, or even just you're saying like intention behind why I'm engaging with these devices or with technology to begin with. I really love what you talk about in terms of just intention in general. That's a big kind of theme in my space of work, is like, the intention behind music. And, like you were saying, it starts before the game. It starts before the concepts. It's all the way from the beginning of what are we intending to do from a creative perspective, but also what are we intending the outcome to be for the, listener, or for the person engaged in the experience.
I know we're going to shout out different answers, but if I asked all of us to just shout out what's your most important resource? 1, 2, 3.
Cody. Oh, sorry.
A lot of
Our therapy designers are for me are some of the biggest reasons. But I agree with you. I think that there's, I don't think there is any bigger resource for us than really the digital economy that's available to us through the internet. And then beyond that, I mean, it really balances between that and the people in our lives, right?
So a lot of people will answer time. They'll just say time is my biggest resource. I don't have it. I don't have enough of it, because it's time that you spend with friends. It's time you spend with your family, your loved ones.
I have time because I got Cody. I just asked Cody, hey, Cody, can you just make the world go round sideways? He's like, I got that.
I'll do my best.
If your time is spent mindlessly, then it just kind of fritters by. So
that's not a nice thing to say about Cody. That's not.
So in this book, one of the key premises is that attention practices are actually one of our biggest resources, and it doesn't mean anything without our intention. So the book has key ways to link intention. Start with that. Let it guide your attention practices, and then as you're shining a light on your experience, then your life becomes a moment by moment experience, where it's
beautiful.
not you perseverating over the past or predicting the future and kind of stressing out about that. But that's why even on this podcast, I came to it saying, I want to be here right now with all of you. Like it's a Fatboy Slim moment.
I love
right
it.
Now.
Right here,
so
right now.
I love how we just both joke around about that and also take the meaning really seriously underneath it.
Yeah.
And that's one thing, even going back to Barnaby's question, like I think that's one of the most important parts of it, is just humanizing it. The like how do we teach and start these things in the classroom? Humanize it. Nobody likes having that VR headset on. It's covering your eyes, it's on your face, it's touching
until you do. Don't like it
exactly.
Until you do, and then boy, do you like it.
It's gonna give you a headache after a while. Like it's gonna, your eyes are gonna have to adjust to it. So it's humanizing that experience.
This is Kiki doing a commercial for Meta. This is going.
Yes, your face goes into Wonder Face, a wow face.
It's gonna make you all right around here.
There's so many different headsets other than just Meta. But as somebody who has I get motion sickness. I have a small inner ear, so when I'm playing a lot of these games, I have to be cognizant of things like the sensitivity of how fast you're moving around and things like that. And if there's a fisheye effect, the field of view.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and certainly the motion and stuff
face.
like that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, so
and I'm sorry, Kiki, to
learning
jump
with
over
them.
You, but I got to jump in for a sec because I'm actually at time here.
Yeah, we've gotten really.
And I want you guys to keep rolling if you're up for it. But I got to.
Down. I
know you've got a halo. I think you planned this, knowing you. You have to look at this. Yeah, I love that.
Like look, this book cover and me.
Yeah, it's beautiful. That'll be the thumbs.
That's the thumbnail right there.
Exactly.
But before I run out on you guys, there's something I want to say that I want to be really clear about. I'm serious about this being the beginning. Caitlin spent some time with us with Deep Well while we were redefining who we were. She spent some time at Rocky Mountain Lodge writing on parts of that book and experiencing kind of part of the reality that, that's the kind of, matter of fact, we're on our way there all on October 4th and 5th. That's where we huddle back together to do the things that we do to build the stuff that we're building. And this really was intentionally the first out of the chute thing that when we all talked about who's building what and when can somebody get something done, it turns like Caitlin's actually good at getting shit done. So, it was, and she was far down the path. So this is a really important book and you should buy it unless of course you're a close friend of mine, in which case you're getting one for Christmas. So
there you go.
Just be careful with that one. But really, I love what you've done here, Caitlin, with this thing, and I love what you're bringing to our community. I think it's awesome. I'm so happy to be part of it and to have you floating around in our world. And I'll see you all real soon. I'll see a
Thank
lot
you.
of them.
It's
But
an
Rocky
honor.
Man,
Thank you so much. And I feel like the end, in certain ways, is just the beginning. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel that way about a lot of things, but
It's a
I feel like
spiral.
I can see a whole vista around us, and it feels like it's glowing. So I'm really grateful both for the words that you say in support and also how we live these messages every day. And it's emergent. I've used the word emergence before, and I feel like I'm so excited that I can't predict everything. I can't predict the map. I just know the compass. Like the compass is set.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I felt a calling to write this book in this moment. Not yeah. So
I
that's
remember you talking about that. And, the last thing I'm going to say just as I pop out on you guys is immersive medicine isn't just really something that is delivered towards others. The making of it is medicine too. So as a creator, if you
Mm.
feel that something's broken or not quite where you need to be, participating in this community and kind of growing with this thing, and then knowing that we're also moving to a place where we're going to be remunerated for the ability to do this as well. We can make a living doing good stuff in a very good way. And every day you're in that studio, you come out with a little piece of you feeling more complete. I love that. That's where we're going. And so
Amazing.
I will say goodbye with that. And I'll see some of you at Rocky Mountain that can make it. That's going to be awesome. We're going to be having a good time and some amazing live bands and some good stuff that's going to be happening there just shortly too.
Awesome.
So
Great.
thanks,
see
Thanks,
y'all.
Ryan.
Ryan.
Thank
Bye.
We'll wrap this up. Appreciate you so much.
I'll
Bye.
hang on for a minute or two.
Yeah, we could just
Can
take
I
a couple minutes.
can I
Yeah, go
can I
for it,
wrap up
Barnaby.
with a question for
Oh yeah,
everyone?
Perfect.
I,
Yeah.
Just
I have a
because it
side note
has
that occurred to me.
been so informative, so much information, and everyone's input has been so amazing. There's this moment, like you talk about emergence and kind of like this kind of like rebirth. We're kind of learning how to interact with technology after having kind of a poor relationship with it.
Mm.
You
Yeah.
mentioned in scuba, and it's very ironic because it's the same thing that happens when you have a VR headset. Kiki can speak to this. There's this moment when you take off the VR headset and you're kind of faced with reality. And you kind of have to
Mm.
make a decision of how do you want to interact with the world after all those experiences. I hope we can all kind of go around and kind of share what we hope may be the experiences that we hope, whether it be clients or listeners or people who we end up helping in the future. What is that feeling you want them to have when they take off that headset? I know, Kiki, you have a lot of firsthand experience with this as you are a VR developer. You have a lot of feedback when you actually have students or clients actually take off a VR headset and give you that experience of what it was like in that new world, and then coming back to reality. Um, what is that feeling, or what is that thing that we hope as designers of these experiences that we want to leave people with, if everyone doesn't mind sharing?
I mean, for me, I think the biggest thing is like a yearning for more, right? Like I want somebody to come out and then to want to go back in, not for like obviously like any bad reasons, but for them to say, wow, like that was so releasing, or that was so empowering, or that was just such an amazing, unique experience that, I want more of that, right? So I think that would be honestly the biggest compliment. It's like a chef, right? If you're a chef and somebody finishes your meal and they ask for more, you're like, I'd be honored. The biggest compliment. So I think that is really the goal, in my opinion, is when people are starting to ask for more experiences, more media, more treatment, more care, whatever that may be.
And I love that you mentioned that you didn't want it to be a crutch. Like you don't want people to be like the
No.
Matrix, like stuck and like this
Yeah,
is better than the real world and not being
exactly.
able to properly interface. But like I love that being able to something that people can dip into in a healthy way, and kind of
Hmm.
like Ryan mentioned, like there's nothing wrong with having a Big Mac. There's nothing wrong with interacting with these things. It's just how do we do it?
Yeah.
Um, I want to leave Caitlin with the last thought. Kiki, how would you want people to experience taking off that headset and kind of coming to grips with this kind of new reality and new relationship with technology?
I guess for it to be, for those skills to be able to transfer still. So, like, my work with AR and VR has always been on the digital art intersectionality. So, when we go into digital art as opposed to traditional art, there's this huge disconnect for, like, I use an iPad, for example. It's a very glassy screen instead of a paper. You're not feeling that
the tactile,
yeah, you're not feeling that
responsiveness.
like traction. You're like, when you're on your iPad, it, like, when you're drawing on glass, it's gonna be all over the place. So one thing about learning in VR, and you're still able to use that muscle memory of drawing. There's not as much traction because you're literally just drawing in the air. But I mean, just finding ways for what you're doing in VR to still be able to transition to when you're out of VR, I think is super important to me. I don't want it to be like you said, oh, I have to be in the matrix all the time. I
Right.
have to, for me to be able to create anything, I have to be, no. You can learn some of the stuff that you can use some of the stuff you learned while being in VR and transfer it into your other work. I think also brainstorming and being able to get rough ideas out in VR is a lot easier than learning the medium of, I want to draw a 3D shape but I have to imagine it in 2D, or I have
Mm-hmm.
to um try and think of something but in a non-linear way. So one thing in with VR, you can use things like Gravity Sketch, which literally allow you to draw in 3D. You can make people design shoes, for example. So you can, instead of just trying to draw it from the left or right side, you can actually be like, okay, I want it to be this wide. I can turn it
Right.
and see what it looks like from the top. What is the print going to look like on the bottom? Like, maybe I can line my foot up to it because it's VR, so you can still see yourself sometimes. So maybe line up your foot. Will that even fit me, for
Yeah.
example? So yeah, I think it's just huge to have transferable skills and be able
I,
to use it elsewhere.
Thank you. I just want to quickly shout out Toby. You know
I
you
know.
can't be here with
Yeah,
you.
Toby's
Thank you
not
so
here.
much for all you do. We miss you. Toby, as an occupational therapist, will literally jump on exactly what you said. Because when you
Mhm.
think about actually being able to apply the things that we're teaching you, it's how do you actually apply them in the real world, and how do you do so safely without
Mm-hmm.
re-injuring, without causing more trauma. So you've kind of nailed that in the head, and I wanted to thank you so much for that. Caitlin, you've been such a great guest. You kind of like shaped this idea. So as you kind of like having this experience of us kind of take off that headset after really diving into the book and learning as much information as we have for this episode, what do you want us to take away from this, and like what do you hope our listeners kind of take away from this experience that you kind of dropped us into?
Wow, Barnaby. I feel like I'm going to get emotional here. I've been deeply listening to everybody's answers. So what comes out is going to be intuitive. I haven't been thinking, what am I going to answer? I've just been like, oh yeah, yes. Oh wow. One of the first questions today in this conversation was, why is the book called Digital Wellbeing? And I don't think I even answered that. And it relates to this answer. I was talking about how I view well-being and how I view this term. When the publisher and I talked back and forth about what the book should be titled, it ended up with Digital Wellbeing because the world needs that, and that's understandable. What is it? The alternate title was going to be Elevate. So I just want to say that first, because I think about what you come out of when you take off the headset, or when you leave an experience, and you don't really leave, like these 7 E's that we were talking about. You kind of like, you can encounter a piece of art many times in your life, and you always have a different experience because you're different if you really come
Mm-hmm.
to it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and this scuba framework is in the book, mapped out so people can see it. When I was little, I loved reading stories where they started with a map, because I kind of knew that if the book had a map at the beginning, it was going to be an adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I used to be like totally into sci-fi, into a lot of different stories. And that's the way when someone comes out of an experience, I want them to feel that elevation of being in a different plane of agency and also really soulfully connected, feel like they have their ground, like they haven't like what you're talking about, it's not escapism, it's
Mm-hmm.
actually coming back. um, we didn't say the word love on this program yet, but now I dropped it. You know,
It's
some
out there.
people some people come in and they feel, broken and like they need to be healed. That's okay. They come in any way they are, and I want to say, hey, I see you, what's your story? And
Yeah.
they're coming through an experience. And I'd say when they come out, I would love for people to leave knowing that they were always enough and they always had it in them. Like
Mm.
this is not something where there's a band-aid or something that fixed something. What each of you has said, it's like it's a layer cake where it's just
Yeah,
like,
I
hey,
love. There's so many layers. Yeah,
yeah,
everything we've been
Mhm.
talking about is just so layered.
yeah, but that's
And
I
even
want
what
to
you're saying with wellness, just like
yeah.
physical and layering on the digital to it. It's beautiful.
What if everybody in the world felt a purity of love and like they are enough, and they can come and that's available to them when they need it,
Yeah.
or when they feel like they want that. And this type of medicine can be really accessible to a lot of people. So that's why, for me, working with VR and with a lot of heroes' journeys, you can do this for leaders without any headset. Like I was doing
Mm-hmm.
this at the TED conference, and um, a year ago, went there with a bunch of leaders and had them designing, as Kiki was saying, we were designing objects and saying, how does this object tell a story? And then how could you use a spatial garden to tell that story better? And like, imagine you have a headset on, like you were saying, you start to see from different perspectives, and it's literally telling yourself to shift your angle, to step
Mm-hmm.
out of what you thought was your preconceived notion. And I think that can be really healing for this country too. um, just a side note, I heard that that's why they design labyrinths, so that the human body has to move in different directions, because spatially, when you shift your view, your physical body is being cued to say, hey, it's not just this way. Like what I
Mm.
thought was the
Yeah.
right path, it could be this way. As Kiki said, it could be from on high.
Mhm.
How do I get playful with myself and realize I'm an animal? We're all animals,
Yeah.
and secretly we all just want to be loved and know that we're enough. So that's
Amazing.
my answer.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Caitlin. It's
thank you
been
for that.
Yeah, it's been so lovely to have you. And I
Likewise.
know this is probably one of our longest episodes yet, which is fantastic because there's just so much to unpack. I mean, the book, there's so much we haven't even talked about in the book. There's chapters that we haven't even shown a light on. So listeners, please check this out.
Mhm.
It's called Digital Wellbeing by Caitlin Krause. You can
Thank
find
you.
it on Amazon. You can pre-sale it there or get it pre-ordered. It comes out tomorrow as we're recording, which will be the day you guys are hopefully hearing this. Yeah, you'll see it there. And Caitlin, I know you've got
Yeah,
to hop around because you're releasing a book tomorrow, so I
that's
want to be
right.
mindful of your time. But thank you so much again, just for being here and sharing your experience and your perspective and this amazing book that you've written. It's just wonderful.
I'm honored.
Well, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. It was a pleasure chatting with Caitlin, and exploring more about her book. Remember to check out our website, immersivemedicine.org, and as well connect with us on the Immersive Medicine Network LinkedIn page if you have not already.
Hmm.
And if you have any comments, questions, please feel free to put them down there as well in the comments and let us know, and hopefully we can answer them next time. But thanks for tuning in again.
Thank you,
Awesome.
everyone. It's been an honor.
Yes, thank you. And thanks, Barnaby, for tuning on as a guest
Yes.
today instead of producer behind the scenes. That was kind of nice.
First of
Awesome.
many, I'm sure.
Great. Thank you, guys.